Good morning, West Coast Nazarenes. Welcome to day 24 of Waken Word with Andrew Corby from the Port Alberni Church of the Nazarene. Today we pick up in Nehemiah, head through Esther, and all the way down to Job to get into that to the end today. And so let's start with the day of prayer. Thank you, Lord Jesus, again for the opportunity to get together and read your word. And I thank you that weekend we get to see the ways that you are continually watching out for your people in all circumstances, that you really do have everything in your hands. And we can learn to trust that more and more each day. In your name I pray, amen. So for our song today, I've just thought of a little song that the kids produced during our COVID music production days. He's got the whole world in his hands.
He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the little bitty baby in his hands. He's got the little bitty baby in his hands. He's got the little bitty baby in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got you and me, brother, in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got you and me, sister, in his hands. He's got you and me, sister, in his hands. He's got you and me, sister, in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got everybody here in his hands. He's got everybody here in his hands. He's got everybody here in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the wind and the rain in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the sun and the moon in his hands. He's got the sun and the moon in his hands. He's got the sun and the moon in his hands. He's got the whole world 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 in his hands. So you're recording? Me? You're trying to get me to talk in a British accent, are you? And I probably just fell for it.
And the Kinza will appreciate if I just go ahead and pause the movie there. They had a little bit of fun at the end of that recording, adding a few outtakes, you might say. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into the word. So we pick up today in Nehemiah chapter 8. And all the people gathered as one man into the square before the water gate, and they told Ezra the scribe to bring back the book of the law that Moses had commanded Israel. So Ezra the priest brought the law before the assembly, both men and woman who could understand what was heard on the first day in the 7th month. And he read from it facing the square before the water gate from early morning until midday in the presence of the men and the women of those who could understand. And the ears of all the people were attentive to the book of the law. And Ezra the scribe stood on a wooden platform where they made for this purpose. And beside him stood Matthias, Shema, Ananiah, Uriah, Hilkiah, Maaseiah, and on his right, Pedaiah, Mishael, Malachishai, Hashem, Hashbaddanah, Zechariah, Meshullam on his left hand. And Ezra opened the book in the sight of the people, for he was above the people, and as he opened it, all to the people stood. And Ezra blessed the Lord, the great God, and all the people answered, Amen, Amen, lifting up their hands and bowed their heads and worshipped the Lord with their faces to the ground. Also, Jeshua, Benai, Sherebiah, Jamin, Akub, Shebethai, Horai, Manasseh, Keltai, Ezrai, Josabad, Hanan, Paliai. The Levites helped the people understand the law. While the people remained in their places, they read from the book of the law, the law of God clearly, and they gave the sense so that the people understood the reading. And Nehemiah, who was the governor, and Ezra, the priest and the scribe of the Levites, who taught the people, said to the people, This day is holy to the Lord your God. Do not mourn or weep. For all the people wept as they heard the words of the law. Then he said to them, Go your way, eat the fat, and drink sweet wine, and send portions to anyone who has nothing ready for this day holy to our Lord. And do not be grieved, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. So the Levites calmed all the people, saying, Be quiet, for this day is holy. Do not be grieved. And the people went their way to eat and drink and send portions, and to make great rejoicing, because they had understood the words that were declared to them. On the second day, the heads of the father's house of all the people with the priests and Levites came together, and Ezra the scribe, in order to study the words of the law. And they found it written in the law that the Lord had commanded by Moses that the people of Israel should dwell in booths during a feast of the 7th month, and they should proclaim it and publish it in all their towns in Jerusalem. Go out to the hills and bring branches of olive, wild oil, myrtle, palm, and other leafy trees to make booths as it is written. So the people went out and brought them and made booths for themselves, each on his roof, and in their courts and in the courts of their house, God, and in the square and the water gate and the square of the gate of Ephraim, and all the assembly, all of those who returned from captivity made booths and lived in the booths for the days of Jeshua the son of Nun. To that day the people of Israel had not done so. And there was very great rejoicing, and day by day, from the first day to the last day, he read the book of the law of God. They kept the feast 7 days, and on the 8th day there was solemn assembly according to the rule. Nehemiah chapter 9. Now on the 24th day of this month, the people of Israel were assembled with fasting and sackcloth and with earth on their heads, and Israelites separated themselves from all foreigners, and they stood and confessed their sins and iniquities to their fathers. And they stood up in their place and read from the book of the law of the Lord and their God for a quarter of the day, and for another quarter of it they made confession and worshipped the Lord their God. On the stairs, the Levites and Jeshua and Benai and Caleb and Shebediah and Buni and Shebediah and Bani and Shemaiah, and they cried with a loud voice to the Lord their God. Then the Levites, Jeshua, Kadmiel, Bani, Hashbei, Sherebiah, Hodrai, Shabaniah, and Palthiel, stand up and bless the Lord your God from everlasting to everlasting. Blessed be your glorious name, which is exalted and blessed above all blessing and praise. You are the Lord, you alone. You have made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all their hosts, and earth and all that's on it, and the seas and all that's in them. And you preserve all of them, and the host of heaven worships you. You are the Lord, the God, who chose Abram and brought him out of Ur of the Chaldeans and gave him the name Abram. You found his faithful heart before you and made with him the covenant to give his offspring in the land of Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Jebusite, the Girgashite, and you have kept your promise, for you are righteous. And you saw the affliction of our fathers in Egypt, and heard their cry at the Red Sea, and performed signs and wonders against Pharaoh and all his servants, and all the people of his land. For you knew that they acted arrogantly against our fathers. And you made a name for yourself, as it is to this day. And you divided the sea before them, so that they went through the midst of the sea in dry land. And you cast their pursuers into the depths of the stone and the mighty waters. By a pillar of cloud you led them in day, and by a pillar of fire in the night, to light for them to the way in which they should go. You came down on Mount Sinai and spoke with them from heaven, and them in right rules and true laws, good statutes and commandments. And you made known to them your holy Sabbath, and commanded and them commandments and statutes and the laws by Moses your servant. You gave them bread from heaven for their hunger, and brought water out of the rock for their thirst. You told them to go to possess the land that you had sworn to give them. But they and our fathers acted presumptuously and stiffened their neck, and did not obey your commandments. They refused to obey, and were not mindful of the wonders that you performed among them, but they stiffened their neck and appointed a leader to return to their slavery in Egypt. But you are God, ready to forgive, gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. You did not forsake them, even when they made for themselves a golden calf, and said, "This is your God, whom brought you up out of Egypt," and had committed great blasphemies. You and your great mercies did not forsake them in the wilderness. The pillar of cloud to lead them the way did not depart from them, nor did the pillar of fire by night light for them the way by which you should go. You gave your good spirit to instruct them, and did not withhold your manna from their mouth, and gave water for their thirst. 40 years you sustained them in the wilderness, and they lacked nothing. Their clothes did not wear out, and their feet did not swell. And you gave them kingdoms and peoples, and allotted to them every corner. So they took possession of the land of Sihon, king of Heshbon, and the land of Og, king of Bashan. You multiplied their children as stars of heaven, and you brought them out to the land that you had told their fathers to enter and possess. So the descendants went in and possessed the land, and you subdued before them in the inhabitants of the land, and the Canaanites, and gave them into their hand, with their kings and the peoples of their land, and they might do with them as they would. And they captured fortified cities and rich land, and took possession of houses full of good things, cisterns, already hewn vineyards, olive orchards, and fruit trees in abundance. So they ate and were filled, and became fat, and delighted in themselves in your great goodness. Nevertheless, they were disobedient, and rebelled against you, and cast your law behind their back, and killed your prophets, who had warned them, in order to turn them back to you. And they committed great blasphemies. Therefore you gave them into the hand of the enemies, who made them suffer. And in their time of suffering they cried out to you, and you heard them from heaven. And according to your great mercies you gave them saviors, who saved them from the hand of their enemies. But after they rest and did evil again before you, and you abandoned them to the hand of their enemies, so that they had dominion over them. Yet when they turned and cried to you, you heard from heaven, and many times you delivered them according to your mercies. And you warned them in order to turn them back to your law, yet they acted presumptuously, and did not obey your commandments, but sinned against your rules, which if a person does them, he shall live by them. And they turned a stubborn shoulder, and stiffened their neck, and would not obey. Many years you bore with them, and warned them by your Spirit through your prophets, yet they would not give ear. Therefore you gave them into the hand of the peoples of the lands. Nevertheless, in your great mercies you did not make an end of them, or forsake them, for you are a gracious and merciful God. Now therefore, our God, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God, who keeps a covenant and steadfast love, let not all hardships seem little to you that came upon us, upon our kings, upon our princes and our priests, our prophets, our fathers, and all people since time of the kings of Assyria until this day. Yet you have been righteous in all that has come upon us, and you have dealt faithfully, and we have acted wickedly. Our kings, our princes, our priests, our fathers have not kept your law, or paid attention to your commandments and your warnings that you gave them, even in their own kingdom, and amid your great goodness that you gave them, and in the large and rich land that you set before them. They did not serve you or turn from their wicked works. Behold, we are slaves this day in the land you gave to our fathers to enjoy its fruit and eat its gifts. Behold, we are slaves, and yet its rich yield goes to the kings whom you have set over us because of our sins. They rule over our bodies and our livestock as they please, and we are in great distress. Because of this, we make a firm covenant in writing. On this sealed document are the names of our princes, Levites, and our priests. Nehemiah chapter 10. On the seals are the names of Nehemiah, the governor, the son of Halakah, Zedekiah, Sarai, Azariah, Jeremiah, Pastor, Amariah, Malchijah, Hatash, Shabaniah, Malach, Haram, Meremoth, Obadiah, Daniel, Gineathon, Baruch, Meshullam, Abijah, Mijamin, Maziah, Bilgai, Shemiah. These are the priests, and the Levites, Jeshua, the son of Azaniah, Binui, of the sons of Henadad, Kadmiel, and their brothers, Zabaniah, Hodiah, Kelita, Peliah, Hanan, Micah, Rehob, Hashabiah, Zakur, Sherebiah, Hodah, Bani, Benu, the chiefs of the people, Parash, Pahath-Moab, Elam, Zatu, Bani, Buni, Asgad, Babi, Adonijah, Bigva, Adin, Ater, Hezekiah, Azar, Hodiah, Hashem, Bezai, Harpin, Anoth, Nebiah, Magabish, Meshullam, Hezir, Meshabel, Zadok, Jeddah, Pelatiah, Hanan, Aliah, Hoshea, Hananiah, Hashiab, Halishah, Pidiah, Shobek, Reum, Mashma, Mishnah, Ahia, Hanan, Anan, Malek, Haram, Bana. The obligations. The rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, the temple servants, and all who have separated themselves from the peoples of the lands of the law of God, their wives, their sons, their daughters, all who have knowledge and understanding, join with their brothers and their nobles and enter into a curse and an oath to walk in God's law that was given by Moses, the servant of God, to observe and do all the commandments of the Lord and his rules and his statutes. We will not give our daughters to the peoples of the land or take daughters for our sons. And if the peoples of the land bring in any goods or grain on the Sabbath day to sell, we will not buy from them on the Sabbath or on the holy day. And we will forego the crops of the 7th year and the exaction of every debt. We also take on ourselves the obligation to give yearly a third part of a shekel for the service of the house of God, and the showbread, the regular grain offering, the regular burnt offering, the Sabbaths, the new moons, the appointed feast, the holy things, and the sin offerings to make atonement for Israel, and all the work of the house of our God. We, the priests, the Levites, and the people have likewise cast lots for the wood offering to bring it to the house of our God, according to our father's house, the times appointed year by year to burn on the altar of the Lord our God, as it is written in the law. We obligate ourselves to bring the first fruits of their ground and the first fruits of every tree year by year to the house of the Lord. Also, to bring to the house of God, to the priests who minister to the house of God, the firstborn of our sons, of our cattle, as it is written in the law, and the firstborn of heads of our herds and our flocks, to bring the first of all our dough and all our contributions to the fruit of every tree, the wine and the oil to the priests, the chambers to the house of the God, house of our God, and to bring to the Levites the tithes from our ground, for it is the Levites who collect the tithes in all our towns where we labor. And the priest, the son of Aaron, shall be with the Levites when the Levites receive the tithes, and the Levites shall bring up the tithe and the tithes to the house of God, to the chambers of the storehouse for the people of Israel. And the sons of Levi shall bring the contribution of grain, wine, and oil to the chambers where the vessels of the sanctuary are, as well as the priests who minister, and the gatekeepers and the singers. We will not neglect the house of our God. Nehemiah chapter 11. Now the leaders of the people lived in Jerusalem, and the rest of the people cast lots to bring 1 out of 10 to Jerusalem in the holy city, while 9 out of 10 remained in other towns. And the people blessed the men who willingly offered to live in Jerusalem. These are the chiefs of the province who lived in Jerusalem, but in the towns of Judah everyone lived on his property. In their towns, Israel the priests and the Levites and the temple servants and the descendants of Solomon's servants, and in Jerusalem lived the sons of Judah and of the sons of Benjamin. Jerusalem lived the sons of Judah and of the sons of Benjamin, and the sons of Judah, Athaniah the son of Uzziah, the son of Zechariah, the son of Amariah, the son of Sheptiah, the son of Malchiel, the son of Perez, and Messiah, the son of Baruch, the son of Kohoz, son of Haziah, son of Adiah, son of Jorib, son of Zechariah, son of Shilonite. All the sons of Perez who lived in Jerusalem were 468 valiant men. And these are the sons of Benjamin: Salu, the son of Meshullam, son of Jud, son of Pedaz, son of Koah, son of Messiah, son of Elah, son of Jeshua, and his brothers, men of valor, 928. Joel, the son of Zikri, was their overseer, and Judah, the son of Hasunah, was the second over the city. Of the priests, Jedediah, son of Jorab, Jashin, Sarai, the son of Hilkiah, and of Meshach, and of Zadok, and of son of Merah, son of Ahitub, ruler of the house of God, and their brothers who did the work of the house, 822. And Adai, the son of Jehom, son of Paliel, son of Amzi, son of Zechariah, son of Pashnur, son of Malachijah, and his brothers and heads' houses, 242. And Amashai, the son of Azarel, the son of Azai, the son of Meshilemoth, son of Emer, their brothers, big, mighty, men of valor, 128. Their overseer was Zabdiel, the son of Hagodolim, and in the Levite Shemai, and their son of Hashab, the son of Askim, the son of Haspir, the son of Bunai, the son of Shabbatai, and Joseph, and the chiefs and the Levites who were over the work and out of the house, and Mattaniah, the son of Micah, the son of Zabdi, the son of Asaph, who was the leader of the praise, and who gave thanks, and Babakiah, the second among his brothers, and Abda, the son of Shema, the son of Gela, the son of Jonathan, the Levites in the holy city, were 284. The gatekeepers, Akub, Talmud, and their brothers who kept watch at the gates were 172. And the rest of Israel and the priests and the Levites were in the towns of Judah, every one his inheritance. But the temple servants lived on. Ophel and Ziha and Giphi were in the temple servants. The overseer of the Levites in Jerusalem was Uzzi, the son of Bani, the son of Hashbir, the son of Mattaniah, the son of Micah, the son of Asaph, the singers over the work of the house of God, for there was a command from the king concerning them, and a fixed provision of the singers is every day required. And Petaniah, the son of Meshabel, the sons of Zerah, the sons of Judah, was at the king's side in all matters concerning the people. And as for the villages with their fields, some of the people of Judah lived in Kiriath Arba and its villages, and in Dibon and its villages, and in Jezreel and its villages, and in Jeshua and Moladah and Bethpelet, and Hazar Shul and Beersheba and its villages, and Ziklag and Mechah and its villages, and Anriman and Zorath and Jamath and Zana and Adam and their villages, Lachish and its field, and Ashkelon and its villages. So they encamped from Beersheba to the valley of Hinnom. The people of Benjamin also lived from Geba onward, and Michmash and Ahijah and Bethel and its villages, Ayaroth and Nob and Algan and Hazar and Ramah and Gittim, Hazan and Zebah and Nabalah, Lod and Ono, the valley of craftsmen, and certain divisions of the Levites in Judah were assigned to Benjamin. Nehemiah chapter 12. These are the priests and the Levites that came up with Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, and Sarai, and Jeremiah, and Ezra, and Amariah, and Malach, and Hattus, and Shechaniah, and Ram, and Merimoth, and Edo, and Githra, and Adriah, and Mejam, and Mecca, and Bilgah, and Shemaiah, and Joriab, and Jedediah, and Silo, and Amok, and Hilkiah, and Jedediah. These were the chief priests and their brothers in the days of Jeshua. And the Levites, Jeshua, Beni, Kadmiel, Shemra, Judah, and Mattaniah, who were brothers in charge of the songs of thanksgiving, and Bachanabigah, and Unai, and the brothers stood opposite them in service. And Jeshua was the father of Joachim, Joachim the father of Elishab, Elishab the father of Jodiah, Jodiah the father of Jonathan, and Jonathan the father of Jeduah. And the days of Joachim were, all the days of Joachim were And in the days of Joachim were priests, heads of fathers' houses of Sarai, Merai, Jerai, Hanai, and Ezra, and Melsham, and Amrai, and Jehom, and Malachi, and Jonathan of Sheba, and Joseph of Haram, and Adi, and Mirthan, and Heklet, and Edo, and Zechariah, and Genathon, and Meshullam, and Abijah, and Zechariah of Miniman, and Moriah, and Pidan of Bidekah, and Shemai, and Shimei, Jonathan of Jorab, and Mattaniah of Jedi, and Uzi, and Shelley, and Shekali, and Amr, and Eker, Hila, Abijah, Jenison, and Nathal. In these days of Elishab, Jonathan, and Jeddah, the Levites were recorded as heads of the fathers' houses. So too were the priests of the reign of Darius and the Persian, as were the sons of Levi. Their heads of the fathers and houses are written in the book of the Chronicles until the days Jonathan the son of Eliashib, and the chiefs of the Levites, Hashabiah, Sherebiah, and Jeshua, the son of Cadmiel, with their brothers who stood opposite them to praise and give thanks according to the commandment of David, the man of God, watch by watch. Mattaniah, Babakah, Meshullam, Talmud, and Akab were gatekeepers standing on guard of the storehouses and the gates. These were in the days of Joachim, the son of Jeshua, the son of Josach, the days of Nehemiah, the governor of Ezra, and the priest and the scribe. And the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought all the Levites in their places to bring them to Jerusalem and to celebrate the dedication with gladness, with thanksgivings, with singing and cymbals and harps and lyres. And the sons of the singers gathered together from the districts surrounding Jerusalem, from its villages, the Netophathites, also the Beth Gilgal, and from the region of Geth and Amrathah, for the singers had built themselves villages in Jerusalem. And the priests and Levites purified themselves, and they purified the people and the gates and the wall. Then I brought leaders of Judah up onto the wall and appointed two great choirs and gave thanks. One went to the south and one to the dung gate, and after them went Hosea, the half leaders of Judah, and Azra and Ezra and Meshullam, and Judah and Benjamin and Shemiah and Jeremiah, and certain of the priest's sons with trumpets. Zechariah, the son of Jonathan, the son of Shemiah, the son of Mattaniah, the son of Micah, the son of Zechariah, the son of Asaph, and his relatives, Shemiah, Asriel, Miliah, Galiah, Maiah, Nathaniel, Judah, and Hanai, with musical instruments of David and the man of God, and of Ezra, the scribe, went before him. At the fountain gate they went up straight before the stairs of the city of David. They ascended to the wall above the house of David to the water gate on the east. The other choir of those who gave thanks went to the north, and I followed them with half the people on the wall above the tower of the ovens and the broad wall, and above the gate of Ephraim, and by the gate of Yeshanah, and the fish gate, and the tower of Hanel, and the tower of 100, and the sheep gate. And they came to a halt at the gate of the guards, so that both choirs, those who gave thanks, stood in the house of God. And I, on behalf of the officials with me, and the priests Elikim and Manasseh and Melachim and Micaiah and Elionai and Zechariah and Hanai with trumpets, and Manasseh and Shemiah and Eleazar and Uzi and Jonathan and Malachijah, Elam and Ezer, and the singers sang with Jezariah as their leader, and they offered great sacrifices that day and rejoiced, for God had made them rejoice with great joy. The women and children also rejoiced, and the joy of Jerusalem was heard far away. On that day, men were appointed over the storerooms, the contributions of the first fruits, and the tithes to gather into the portions required by the law for the priests and the Levites according to the fields and the towns. For Judah rejoiced over the priests and the Levites who ministered, and they performed the service of their God and service of purification, as did the singers and the gatekeepers, according to the command of David and his son Solomon. For long ago, in the days of David and Asaph, there were directors and singers, and there were songs of praise and thanksgiving to God, and all Israel in the days of Zerubbabel, in the days of Nehemiah, gave the daily portions for the singers and the gatekeepers, and they set apart that which was for the Levites, and the Levites set apart that which was for the sons of Aaron. Nehemiah chapter 13. On that day they read the book of Moses in the hearing of the people, and it was found written that no Ammonite or Moabite should enter the assembly of God, for they did not meet with Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. Yet our God turned the curse into a blessing. As soon as the people heard the law, they separated from Israel all those of foreign descent. Now before this, Eliashib the priest, who was appointed over the chambers of the house of God, who was related to Tobiah, prepared for Tobiah a large chamber where they had previously put the grain offering, the frankincense, and the vessels of the tithes of the grain, and the wine and the oil, which were given by the commandment to the Levites, singers and gatekeepers, and contributions for the priests. While this was taking place, I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I went to the king. After some time, I asked leave of the king, and came to Jerusalem, and then discovered that evil Eliashib had done for Tobiah, preparing him a chamber in the courts of the house of God. And I was very angry, and threw all the household furniture of Tobiah out of the chamber. Then I gave orders that they cleanse the chambers, and I brought back the vessels of the house of God, and the grain offerings, and the frankincense. I also found out that the portions of the Levites who had not been given to them, so that the Levites and their singers who did the work had fled each to his field. So I confronted the officials and said, "Why is the house of God forsaken?" And I gathered them together and set in their stations. Then all Judah brought the tithe, the grain, wine, and oil into the storehouses, and I appointed as treasurers over the storehouses Shelmiah the priest, and Zadok the scribe, and Pedaiah of the Levites, and their assistant Hanan, the son of Zakur, son of Mattaniah, for they were considered reliable, and their duty was to distribute to their brothers. Remember me, O God, concerning this, and do not wipe out my good deeds that I have done for the house of God for his service. In those days I saw Judah people treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in heaps of grain and loading them on donkeys, and also wine, grapes, and figs, and all kinds of loads, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I warned them on that day when they sold food. The Tyrians also lived in the city, and brought out fish and all kinds of goods, and sold them on the Sabbath to the people of Judah in Jerusalem itself. Then I confronted the nobles of Judah and said to them, "What is this evil thing that you are doing, profaning the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers act in this way, and did not God bring all this disaster on us and on this city? Now you are bringing more wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath." As soon as it began to grow dark at the gate of Jerusalem, before the Sabbath, I commanded that the doors should be shut, and gave orders that they should not be opened again until after the Sabbath. And I stationed some of my servants at the gates, so that no load might be brought in on the Sabbath day. Then the merchants and the sellers and the kinds of wares lodged outside Jerusalem once or twice. But I warned them and said to them, "Why do you lodge outside the wall? If you do so again, I will lay hands on you." From that time they did not come on the Sabbath. Then I commanded the Levites that they should purify themselves and come guard the gates and keep the Sabbath day holy. Remember this also in my favor, O God, and spare me according to the greatness of your steadfast love. In those days also I saw the Jews who had married women of Ashdod and Ammon and Moab, and half their children spoke the language of Ashdod, and they did not speak the language of Judah, but only the language of each people. And I confronted them and cursed them and beat some of them and pulled out their hair. And I made them take an oath in the name of God, saying, "You shall not give your daughters to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons, or for yourselves. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin on account of such women? Among the many nations there was no king like him. And he was beloved by his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, foreign women made even him to sin. Shall we then listen to you and do this great evil and act treacherously against our God by marrying foreign women? And one of the sons, Jedoiah, the son of Elishib, the high priest, was the son-in-law of Sanballat the Horonite. Therefore I chased him from me. Remember them, O my God, because they have desecrated the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. Thus I cleansed from everything foreign, and I established the duties of the priests and the Levites, each in his work, and I provided for the wood offering at the appointed times for the first fruits. Remember me, O God, for good. And here we are at Esther, chapter 1. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In those days, King Ahasuerus sat in the royal throne in Susa, the citadel. In the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and the governors of the provinces were before him. Well, he showed the riches of the royal glory and the splendor of the pomp and greatness for many days, 180 days. And when those days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court garden of the king's palace. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords, and fine linen and purple and silver, and rods and marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement, and porphyry marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king, and the drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion, for the king had given orders to all the staff of his place to do as each man desired. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehum, Bisa, Harba, Bithkin, Abtha, and Zethar, and Cracus, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of the king, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown, in order to show the peoples and princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs, and the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. Then the king said to the wise men who knew the times, for this was the king's procedure toward all who were versed in law and judgment, the men being Karshas, Shather, Adamatha, Tarsa, Miras, Marsa, and Mamukan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who saw the king's face and sat first in the kingdom. According to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti, because she has not performed the command the king Ahasuerus delivered by the eunuchs? Then Memucan said in the presence of the king, Then Memucan said in the presence of the king and the officials, not only as the king against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but against all the officials and the peoples who were in the provinces of King Ahasuerus, for the queen's behavior will be made known to all women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt. Since they will say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and she did not come, this very day the noble women of Persia and Media, who have heard the queen's behavior, will say the same to all the king's officials, and there will be contempt and wrath and plenty. If it please the king, let a royal order go out from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it may not be repealed, that Vashti is never again to come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal possession to another who is better than she. So when the decree made by the king proclaimed throughout all the kingdom, for it is vast, all the women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. This advice pleased the king and the princess, and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in its own script, and every people in its own language, that every man muster his household and speak according to the language of his people. Esther chapter 2. After these things, when the king and the anger of King Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. The king's young men who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of the kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins in the harem to Susa, to the citadel, under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. Let their cosmetics be given them, and let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This pleased the queen, and so he did so. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shimei, a Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and as when many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in the custody of Haggai, Esther also was taken into the king's palace, but put in custody of Haggai, who had charge of the women. And the young woman pleased him and won his favor. And he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young woman to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. Now when the turn came for each young woman to go to the king Ahasuerus, after being 12 months under the regulations for the woman, since this was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months with oil, myrrh, and 6 months with spices and ointments for women. And when the young woman went to the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her to the king's harem palace. In the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return, and to the second harem in the custody of Shashgaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not go in to the king again unless the king delighted in her, and she was summoned by name. When the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her in, his own daughter, to go to the king, she asked for nothing except for what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who had charge of the women, advised. Now Esther was winning favor in the eyes of all who saw her, and when Esther was taken to the king Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which was the month of the Tebenah, in the 7th year of his reign, the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won grace and favor in his sight more than all the women, and she more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave great feasts for all the officials and servants. It was Esther's feast. He also granted a remission of taxes to the provinces and gave gifts of royal generosity. Now, when the virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people as Mordecai commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as she was brought up by him in the days as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther. And Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When their affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on gallows, and it was recorded in the book of Chronicles in the presence of the king. Esther chapter 3. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all officials who were with him. And the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down to him and paid homage to Haman, for the king said concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down, and said to Mordecai, Why do you transgress the king's command? And when they spoke to him day after day, he would not listen to them. They told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman said that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury, but he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So as he had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, the 12th of the king, so they cast pur, that is, they lots, before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month until the 12th month is the month of Adar. And then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, There's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed amongst the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hand of those who have charge of the king's businesses, that they may put into the king's treasuries. So the king took his signet ring from his hand, and then gave it to Haman the Agagite, son of Hammedatha, and Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, The money is given to you as the people also to do with them as it seems good to you. Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month. An edict according to all Haman had commanded was written to the king's satraps and governors of all the provinces and officials of all the peoples, to every province in his own script, and every people in its own language. It was written in the name of the king Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers the governors of all the provinces and to the officials of all the peoples, to every province in its own script and every people in its own language. And they written the name of the king Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring. And the letters were sent to the king's provinces with instruction to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the document was to be issued and decreed to every province, a proclamation to all the peoples to be ready for that day. The couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel, and the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in the province, wherever the king's command he decreed reached, was a great mourning among the Jews, and the fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's young woman and her eunuchs came and told her the queen was deeply distressed, she sent garments of cloth to Mordecai, so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai and learn what this was and why it was. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and all the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction. that he might show it to Esther and explain him to go to the king and beg for his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and the people in the kings and provinces, and any woman who goes to the king aside from the inner court without being called, there is but one law, to be put to death, except the one whom the king holds out the golden scepter so that he may live. But as for me, I have not been called to come to the king in these 30 days. And they told Mordecai what Esther said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my young woman will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters, while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight, and he held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. And Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. And the king said to her, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you, even up to half my kingdom. And Esther said, if it please you, even to the, what is it? To the, half my kingdom. Esther, if it please the king, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared for the king. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly, so that we may do as Esther has asked. So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared, and they were drinking wine after the feast. And the king said to Esther, what is your wish? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to half of my kingdom it shall be fulfilled. Then Esther answered, my wish and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the feast that I will prepare for them tomorrow, and I will do as the king has said. And Haman went out that day joyful and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home and sent his brothers and friends and his wife Zerai. And Haman recounted from them the splendor and riches, and honored them, how he had advanced above the officials and the servants of the king. Then Haman said, even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared, and tomorrow also I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all this is worth nothing to me, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting in the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. This idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. Esther, chapter 6. On that night the king could not sleep, and he gave orders to bring the book of memorable deeds, the chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written how Mordecai had told about Bigtha and Teresh, and how two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, and who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor or distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? The king's young woman who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. And the king said, who is the court? Who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai hanged on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's young men told him, Haman is there standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, What should be done to the man? What should be done to the man whom the king delights in honor? And Haman said to himself, Whom will the king delight in honor more than me? And Haman said to the king, For a man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse the king has ridden, and on whose head the royal crown is set. And let the robes and the horse be handed over to the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man with whom the king delights to honor, and let them lead him on horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, Thus it shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, Hurry, take the robes and horse as you have said, and go do so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing you have mentioned. So Haman took the robes and the horse, and he dressed Mordecai, and he led them through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house mourning and with his head covered. And Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that happened to him. Then his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, If Mordecai, before whom you have surely begun to fall, is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. Well, they were talking with the king's eunuchs arrived, and hurried to bring Haman to the feast Esther had prepared. So the king and Haman went to feast with Queen Esther, and on the second day, as they were drinking wine in the feast of the king again, said to Esther, What is your wish, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom, it shall be fulfilled. Then Queen Esther answered, If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be granted me for my wish and my people, and let my life be granted me for my wish and my people for my request, for we have been sold, and I and my people to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, men and women, I would have been silent, for our affliction is not to be compared with the loss to the king. The king also said to the queen, Who is he, and where is he who has dared to do this? And Esther said, A foe and enemy, this wicked Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. And the king arose in his wrath from the wine drinking and went into the palace garden. But Haman stayed to beg for his life from Queen Esther, he saw the harm was determined against him by the king. And the king returned from the palace garden to the place where they were drinking wine, as Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was, and the king said, Will he even assault the queen in my presence, in my own house? As the word left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbonah, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, said, Moreover, the gallows that Haman has prepared for Mordecai, and whose words saved the king standing in Haman's house, 50 cubits high. And the king said, Hang him on that. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the wrath of the king abated. On that day, King Ahasuerus gave to the Queen Esther the house of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came before the king, for Esther told what was told to her, and the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Then Esther spoke again to the king. She fell at his feet and wept and pleaded with him to avert the evil plan of Haman, the Agagite, and the plot devised against the Jews. When the king held out his golden scepter to Esther, Esther rose and stood before the king, and she said, If it please the king, and if I had found favor in his sight, and if this thing seems right before the king, and I am pleasing his eyes, let an order be written to revoke the letters devised by Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the provinces of the king. For how can I bear to see calamity that is coming to my people? Or how can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred? Then King Ahasuerus said to the Queen Esther, King Ahasuerus and the Queen Esther to Mordecai and the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows, because he intended to lay hands on the Jews. But you may write as you please in regard to the Jews, in the name of the king, and seal it with the king's ring. For an edict written in the name of the king is sealed cannot be revoked. The king's scribes were summoned that time in the third month, which is the month of Sivan, the 23rd day. And an edict was written according to all that Mordecai had commanded concerning the Jews, to the satraps and to the governors and the officials of the provinces from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, to each province its own script, to its own people and land, and the Jews in their script and their language. And he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed it with the king's signet ring. Then he sent the letters by mounted couriers riding on swift horses that were used in the king's service and bred from the royal studs, saying that the king allowed the Jews who were in every city to gather and defend their lives, to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate an armed force of people, any armed force or any people of the province that might attack them, children and women included, and to plunder their goods. And on one day throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, a copy of what was written was to be issued and decreed to every province, being publicly displayed to all the peoples, and Jews were ready on that day to take vengeance on their enemies. So the couriers, mounted on their swift horses that were used in the king's service, rode out hurriedly, urged by the king's command, and the decree was issued in Susa. Then Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in the royal robes in blue and white, and with a great golden crown, and a robe of fine linen and purple. And the city of Susa shouted and rejoiced, and the Jews had light and gladness and honor. And every province in every city, wherever the king's command and his edict reached, there was gladness and joy among the Jews, a feast and a holiday. And many from the peoples of the country declared themselves Jews, for fear of the Jews had fallen upon them. Now in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's command and edict were to be carried out, on the very day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain the mastery over them, the reverse occurred. The Jews gained mastery over those who hated them. The Jews gathered in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king of Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their harm, and no one could stand against them, for the fear of them had fallen on all the peoples. And all the officials of the provinces and satraps and governors and royal agents also helped the Jews, for the fear of Mordecai had fallen on them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces. For the man Mordecai grew more and more powerful. The Jews struck all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them as they pleased to those who hated them. In Susa, the citadel itself, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, and also killed Parastatha and Dalphon and Ashva and Portha and Adalai and Aratha and Parasha and Asa and Arida and Varasha, the 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, but they laid no hand on the plunder. That very day, the number of those killed in Susa, the citadel, was reported to the king, and the king said to Queen Esther, in Susa, the citadel, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, and also the 10 sons of Haman. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your wish? It shall be granted to you. And what further is your request? It shall be fulfilled. And Esther said, if it please the king, let the Jews who are in Susa be allowed tomorrow to also do according to this day's edict, and let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows. So the king commanded this to be done, and a decree was issued in Susa that the 10 sons of Haman were hanged. And the Jews who were in Susa gathered also on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they killed 300 men in Susa, but they laid no hands on the plunder. Now the rest of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also gathered to defend their lives, and got relief from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of those who had hated them, but they laid no hands on the plunder. This was the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day they rested and made that day a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were in Susa gathered on the 13th day and the 14th day, and rested on the 15th day, making that day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews and the villagers who lived in the rural towns hold the 14th day of the month of Adar as a day of gladness and feasting, as a holiday, for a day on which they send gifts of food to one another. And Mordecai recorded these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obligating them to keep a 14th day of the month of Adar, and also the 15th day of the same year the same year by year as the days on which Jews got relief from their enemies, and the month that had been turned for them from sorrow into gladness and from mourning into holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and gladness, days of sending gifts and food to one another and gifts to the poor. So the Jews accepted what they had started to do. They started doing what Mordecai had written for them. For Haman the Agagite, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of all the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had that is, cast lots to crush and destroy them. But when it came before the king that gave orders of writing his evil plan that he had devised against the Jews should return on its own head, and that sons should be hanged on the gallows, therefore they called the days Purim after them before all that is written in the letter, and they had forced in the matter, and what was hoped had happened to them. The Jews firmly obligated themselves and their offspring and all who joined them, that without fail they would keep these 2 days according to what was written, and the time appointed every year, that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, in every clan, province, and city, that these days of Purim should never fall into disuse among the Jews, nor should commemoration of these days cease among their descendants. Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Ahil, and Mordecai the Jew, gave full written authority to confirming this in the second letter about Purim. Letters were sent to all the Jews in 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, in the words of peace and truth, that these days of Purim should be observed in their appointed seasons, as Mordecai the Jew and the Queen Esther obligated them, and as they obligated themselves as their offspring with regard to their fasts and their lamenting. The command of Esther confirmed these practices in Purim, and it was recorded in writing. Esther chapter 10. King Ahasuerus imposed a tax on the land, and on the land of the coastlands and the sea, and all the acts of power and might, in full account of the honor of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him. Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Ahasuerus, and how great among the Jews and popular with the multitude of his brothers, for he sought the welfare of all, and spoke peace to all his people. And here we are in Job. Job chapter 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and his blameless and upright, who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons, 3 daughters, and he possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. So this man was the greatest of all the people of the east. His sons used to hold a feast in the house of each one each day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings in according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." This Job did continually. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth, blameless and upright, a man who fears God and turns away from evil." Then Satan answered the Lord, Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house, and on all he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions and have increased to the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has in your hand, behold, all he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and there came a messenger to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Syrians fell upon them and took them and struck them down with the servants. Now the edge of the sword, and I alone escaped to tell you." When he was yet speaking, came up another and said, The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, another came up and said, The Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them, and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, another came and said, Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. I alone escaped to tell you. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped and said, Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, From where have you come? From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down it. And the Lord said to Satan, Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him on the earth, blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. He holds fast in his taking, although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason. Then Satan answered again to the Lord, Skin for skin, all that man has he will give for his life, but stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, Behold, he is in your hand, only spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores from sole to foot, crown to head, and he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. Then his wife said to him, Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. But he said to her, You speak as one of the foolish women who speak. Shall we receive good from God? And shall we not receive evil? In all this Job did not sin with his lips. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of this evil that had come upon him, they came each from their own place, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. And they made an appointment together to come show him sympathy and comfort him. And when they saw it from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised voices, and they wept. They tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads toward the heaven. And they sat with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was great. Job chapter 3. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth, and Job said, Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night set and man is conceived. Let that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor light shine upon it. Let gloom and deep darkness claim it. Let black clouds dwell upon it. Let the blackness of day terrify it that night. Let the darkness seize it. Let it not rejoice among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of months. Behold, let that night be barren. Let no joyful cry enter it. Let those who curse it curse the day, who are ready to rouse up a Leviathan. Let the stars of dawn be dark. Let it have hope for light, but have none, nor see the eyelids, nor the morning, because it did not shut the doors of my mother's womb, nor hide trouble from my eyes. Why did I not die at birth, come out from the womb and expire? Why did the knees receive me on? Why did the breast that I should nurse? For when I have lain down and been quiet, I would have slept, and I would have been at rest with the kings and counselors of the earth, who were built their ruins for themselves, or with the princes of gold who filled their houses with silver. Or why was I not hidden as a stillborn child, as infants who never see the light? There the wicked cease from troubling, and there were weary at rest. Their prisoners are at ease, and they hear not the voice of the taskmaster. The small and the great are there, and the slave free from his master. Why is the light given to him who is in misery, and the light and bitter soul, who long for death, but it comes not, and who dig more for hidden treasures, who rejoice exceedingly, are glad when they find the grave? Why is a light given to a man whose way is hidden from God and hinged in oil? For my sighing comes instead of my bread, and my groanings are poured out like water. For the thing I fear comes upon me, and when I dread falls before me, I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes. Job chapter 4. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, If one ventures a word with you, will you be impatient? Yet who can keep from speaking? Behold, you have instructed many, and you have strengthened the weak hands. Your words have upheld the him who was stumbling, and you have made firm feeble knees. But now it has come to you, and you are impatient. It touches you, and you are dismayed. Is not your is not your fear of God, your confidence, the integrity of your ways, your hope? Remember who was innocent, who remember who that was innocent ever perished, or where were the upright cut off? I have seen those who plow iniquity and sow trouble and reap the same. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they are consumed. In the roar of a lion, the voice of a fierce lion, the teeth of young lions are broken. The strong lions perished for lack of prey, and the cubs of the lions are scattered. Now a word was brought to me stealthily, my ear received a whisper of it. Amid thoughts from visions in the night, when the deep sun falls on men, dread came upon me, trembling, and made my bones shake. A spirit glided past my face, the hair of my face stood up and stood still, but I could not discern its appearance, a form from my eyes. There was silence, then I heard a voice, Can a mortal man be in the right before God? Can a man be made pure before his Maker? Even in his servants he puts no trust, and his angels he charges with error. How much more those who dwell in the houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust, who are crushed like the moth between the morning and the evening? They are beaten to pieces. They perish forever without anyone regarding it, and their tent cord plucked with them. Do they not die without wisdom? Job chapter 5. Call now anyone who will answer you. To which of the holy ones will you turn? Surely vexation kills the fool, and jealousy slays the simple. I have seen the fool taking root, but suddenly I cursed his dwelling. His children are far from safety. They are crushed in the gate, and there is no one to deliver them. The hungry eat the harvest, and takes them out of their thorns, and the thirsty plant after his wealth. For affliction does not come upon the dust, nor does trouble sprout from the ground. But a man is born to trouble, and the sparks fly upward. As for me, I would seek God, and to God I would commit my cause, who does great things, unsearchable, marvelous, without number. He gives rain on the earth and sends water on the fields. He sets high those who are lowly, and those who mourn are lifted to safety. He frustrates the devices of the crafty, so that their hands achieve no success. He catches the wise in their own craftiness, and the schemes of wily are brought to a quick end. They meet with darkness in daytime and grope at noontime in the night. But he saves the needy from the sword of their mouth, from the hand of the mighty. So the poor have hope and injustice in her mouth. Behold, blessed is the one whom God reproves. Therefore despise not the discipline of the Almighty, for he wounds, but he binds up. He shatters, but his hands heal. He will deliver you from 6 troubles. In seven no evil shall touch you. In famine he will redeem your death, and your war from the power of the sword. You shall be hidden from the lash of the tongue, and shall not fear destruction when it comes. At destruction your famine shall laugh, and shall not fear the beasts of the earth. For you shall be in league with the stones of the field, and the beasts of the field shall be at peace with you. You shall know that your tent is at peace, and you shall inspect the fold and miss nothing. You shall know also that your offspring shall be many, and your descendants the grass of the earth, and you gave your ripe old age like a sheath gathered up in season. Behold, this we have searched out is true. Hear, know you for your good. Job chapter 6. Then Job answered and said, On that my vexation were weighed, and all my calamity laid in the balances, for then it would be heavier than the sand of the sea. Therefore my words have been rash, for the arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks their poison. The terrors of God are arrayed against me. Does the wild donkey bray when he is grass, or the ox low over his fodder? Can that which tasteless has been eaten of the salt, or as any other juice or the mallow? My appetite refuses to touch them. They are as food, as loathsome to me. Oh, that I might have my request, and that my God might fulfill my hope, that it would please God to crush me, that he would loose my hand and cut me off. This is my comfort. I would even exult in pain unsparing, for I have not denied the words of the Holy One. What is my strength that I should wait, and what is my end that I should be patient? It is my strength of stones or the flesh of bronze. Have have I any help in me when resource is driven from me? He who withholds kindness from a friend forsakes the fear of the Almighty. My brothers are treacherous as a torrent bed, as torrential streams pass away, which are dark with ice, and where snow hides itself. When they melt, they disappear. When it is hot, they vanish from their place. The caravans turn aside from their course, and they go into waste and perish. The caravans of Tema look, the travelers of Sheba hope. They are ashamed because they are confident they come and disappointed. For you have become nothing, you see, my calamity and afraid have I? I said, make me a gift, or from your wealth offer me a bribe, or deliver me from my adversary's hand, or redeem me from the hand of the ruthless. Teach me, and I will be silent. Make me understand how I have gone astray. How forceful are upright words. But what does your reproof prove? But what reproof? But what does reproof from you reprove? Do you think that you can reprove words when the speech is despairing? Man is wind. You would even cast lots over the fatherless and bargain over your friend. But now be pleased to look at me, for I will not lie to your face. Please turn, let no injustice be done. Turn now, my vindication is at stake. Is there any injustice on my tongue? Cannot my palate discern the cause of calamity? Job chapter 7. Has not man a hard service on earth, and are not his days like those days of a hired hand, like a slave who longs for the shadow, and like a hired hand who looks for his wages? So I am allotted months of emptiness and nights of misery appointed me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I arise? But the night is long, and I am full of tossing and turning till dawn. My flesh is clothed in worms and dirt. My skin hardens and then breaks out afresh. My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle, and come to their end without hope. Remember that my life is breath. My eye will never again see good, and the eye of him who sees me will behold no more. While your eyes are upon me, I shall be gone. As for the clouds, that fades and vanishes, so he who goes down to Sheol does not come up. He returns no more to his house, nor does his place know him anymore. Therefore I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit, and I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I the sea or the sea monster that you set a guard over me when I say, my bed will comfort me, my couch will ease my complaint? Then you scare me with dreams and terrify me with visions, so that I would choose strangling and death rather than my bones. I loathe my life. I would not live forever. Leave me alone, for my days are a breath. What is man that you make so much of him, that you set your heart on him, that visit him every morning and test him every moment? How long will you look away from me, nor leave me alone till I swallow my spit? If I sin, if I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of mankind? Why have you made your mark? Why have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity? For now I shall lie in the earth. You shall seek me, but I shall not be. Then Billy the Shuhite answered and said, how long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind? Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children have sinned against him, he has delivered them into the hand of their transgression. If you will seek God and plead with the Almighty for mercy, if you are pure and upright, surely he will rouse himself for you and restore your rightful habitation. And though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great. For inquire, please, of bygone ages, and consider what the fathers have searched out. For we are but yesterday and nothing, for our days on earth are a shadow. Will they not teach you and utter words of understanding? Can a papyrus grow where there is no marsh? Can reeds flourish where there is no water? Well, yet in the flower and cut down with wither before any other plant. Such are the paths of all who forget God. The hope of the godless shall perish, his confidence severed, his trust a spider's web. He leans against the house, but it does not stand. He lays hold of it, but does not endure. He is a lush plant before the sun, and his shoots over its garden, and roots and winds in the stone heap. He looks upon the house of stones. If he is destroyed from the place, then it will deny him, saying, I have never seen you. Behold, this is the joy of the way. All out of the soil others will spring. Behold, God will not reject a blameless man, nor take the hand of evildoers. He will fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouting. Those who hate you will be clothed in shame, and the tent of the wicked will be no more. Well, this has been day 24 of our 60-day series of Journey Through the Word. And stay tuned tomorrow for more. God bless and have a great day.